Okay, listen up. We're giving away 2-day passes to the Go Short Film Festival. It's the Netherlands' premier short film festival taking place in Nijmegen from the 1st to the 6th of April. It's a chance for you and a friend to immerse yourself in the world of short films. With over 300 film screening, you can discover emerging talent, experimental storytelling, and the art of short-form filmmaking. From Oscar contenders to experimental gems, bold animations, and thought-provoking documentaries, you're in for a rich cinematic experience. All you have to do is let us know your favorite short film of all time and email us at celebratingcinema@lab111.nl before the 28th of March, and we'll get in touch with the winner. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host, Laura Gommans, and thank you so much for listening. If you love what we do, following and reviewing our podcast in whatever podcast app you're listening on really helps us to be able to make this podcast. This episode is a collaboration with Go Short. That's the Netherlands' premier short film festival taking place in Nijmegen from the 1st to the 6th of April. Hugo sat down with Mathieu Jansen, the artistic leader of Go Short, and together they dive into the world of short filmmaking. Because as you might have heard, the Netherlands are doing pretty well on the short film front. I Am Not a Robot recently received an Oscar for the best live action short, and Nina Gans's Wonder to Wonder was nominated for best animated short. So we thought we'd try and figure out why audience should care more about short films and why they're so important to the film industry. Here's Hugo to find out more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Celebrating Cinema. I'm joined today by Mathieu Jansen, who's the artistic leader of Go Short, the biggest short film festival in the Netherlands, which is gearing up for its 17th edition, happening between the 1st and the 6th of April in the city of Nijmegen. Mathieu, welcome to Celebrating Cinema.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So we're going to dive quite deeply into the phenomenon and the format of the short film. But first, I wanted to ask a little bit about yourself, a bit about your background. How did you get into cinema as, let's say, a lover of film, but also a professional?
Well, I started studying sociology in Nijmegen, which was very much focused on statistics. So I found it a bit more boring than I thought it would be. So very quickly, I was looking for other things to do next to my studies. And at some point, I started working here at the local cinema in Nijmegen, Lux, but first at Public Debate. But then I watched a lot of films at that period, let's say 250 features per year. So I was really into film, like on a private level. And I had some friends who were doing the same, and we were all very passionate about film. And we started to think maybe it's nice to start a new initiative in Nijmegen to screen films that aren't that often screened. So we started Deep End Film, what it was called. And what we did was screen films on special locations that had like a link with the location. So we started this classic Deep End. I don't know if you know it, in an empty swimming pool, Jaws on a boat, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the two friends was also he at that point already worked at Go Short, and he knew much about short film. And he dragged me a bit into short film, I guess, because we also more and more started programming short film because it's a very nice medium to work thematically around some subject. Yeah, I think that's where my love of short film started.
What is it specifically that caught your eye to the phenomenon of short films, and why do they stand out, you could say, compared to feature films that we see theatrically being released in cinemas?
I think one important thing about short film is that usually not much money goes around in the short film world, which has obviously some disadvantages that the people don't make much money, so they often leave the short film world. But as long as people make short films, they have relatively small budgets, which means they can experiment more. Yeah, I think this very often also gives a very more experimental result. And when you watch short films, you see such a diverse palette of what short film can be. And in feature films where much money is involved, there are so many people that have an opinion on this film that it's like much more into some sort of curfew. So yeah, form is very exciting, and also because it takes less long to make a short film, so they very often reflect on society more quickly. So if you want to make a program around a certain topic, there are very often many short films that are already dealing with this topic. So if I don't know, when the war in Ukraine started, you immediately see the next year that there are so many short films about this topic that you always can very nicely work with short film around these themes. And generally, I think short film, because they are short, you often program more short films in one program, which also gives you the opportunity to like combine different perspectives on one theme within one program, while a feature film is more often like one director and one vision on one topic. And with short film, you get in the same amount of time, you get many different angles and approaches. So it's a very nice format to work with also as a programmer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm very much interested in this idea of the urgency of films as well. You mentioned the war in Ukraine and how it immediately kickstarts all of these different films on such a short notice. How important is it for a festival like Go Short and also to hone in immediately on these topics that arise through cinema as a lens to critically reflect on what's happening in the world right now?
Oh, very important, I guess. And it goes two ways. On the one hand, we want to put on the agenda certain topics that we found important. And yeah, that short films are made so fast gives us also the possibility to do it. But the other way around, we get many submissions, of course. Like every year we get around between 3 and 4,000 submissions.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
Well, yeah, and this so short only accepts European submissions. So if I know some other festivals that get like 7,000 or more, so maybe 3,500 is still doable, but it's still a lot. We also try to look what is living uh, within the filmmaker circuit. Like what are themes that we see a lot coming up this year, and so we also try to think the other way, like what feels urgent when we look at the films. So yeah, I guess in those both ways we work with that.
Go Short is already gearing up to its 17th edition. Do you notice also from an audience perspective if there is a very warm and welcoming reception to short films? And is that something that you had to build over the years, or does it come naturally basically for people to give a different attention span to these blocks of short films that are presented together? Because most people, from an audience perspective, of course, are used to go into the cinema, watch one film of 90 or more minutes, and have this, let's say, more singular, immersive experience. Whereas seeing a couple of shorts programmed together can be a very discombobulating, sometimes chaotic or kaleidoscopic, but ultimately often very pleasant experience. So, how do you translate this medium of the short film to audience expectations and their experience during the festival?
I think once people are in the cinema, then they really enjoy format of short films being programmed together. Maybe there was one thing we noticed that when we make our competitions, we select all the films on their like own value, and they are often very like topic heavy and like the more let's say deeper films, more demanding films. And when we make the programs out of the competition films, then it can be quite tough to watch, I don't know, 80 minutes of these films in a row. This is also a feedback we got through the years. So we decided to make the competition program shorter. So it's only 1 hour. Otherwise, I think there's too much to decompress often. But generally, I think people really like it to see this like diverse palette. And if there's one film you don't like, then soon there will be a next one. And this, it works very well. I think it's a bigger problem that people don't know the format. So it's more like I think short film festivals have more a communication problem to explain people what short film is, how it works, that you buy a ticket for a program with several short films. And this whole concept is sometimes hard to translate to the audience. So it's really something you have to build with your local community to get to know what short film is.
Well, as Go Short is also a leading short film festival based in the Netherlands, I'm quite curious what your perspective is as an artistic leader of Go Short on Dutch short film and the way that Dutch short films can position new filmmakers, can launch careers. What kind of contribution do you see that you have towards that? But also, how important is it for Dutch local filmmakers to work in this format to expand their career and build, let's say, their cinematic sensibilities?
Obviously, very important. I mean, almost every filmmaker starts with short film, and I think it's also essential that you do because there has to be some phase in your career where you have the freedom to find your own voice. And like I said earlier, when the budgets get higher, it gets more difficult to find what your voice really is, what distinguishes you from other filmmakers. So this period of experimenting is very important, and yeah, this is done in short film. So for us, it's very important to stimulate this short film climate, and where we can try to facilitate that people can make short films, that we facilitate the knowledge about making short films, that we screen as much as possible from very experienced to less experienced filmmakers, so that the less experienced filmmakers can also meet more experienced filmmakers at the festival. And that, I don't know, people who just start filmmaking meet international programmers, just get a sense of a feeling how this world works. So we hope that Go Short is this place where everything comes together and people can learn from each other, because it's a very important period, I think, in a filmmaker's career.
Yeah, I totally recognize this idea of a short film or short films as a stepping stone for the careers of filmmakers, especially Dutch filmmakers, to launch their career nationally, but also internationally. And I think a great example would be recently I'm Not a Robot by Victoria Warmerdam winning an Oscar for Best Short Film. Do you see that the work that you do with Dutch filmmakers has helped them as well to establish themselves internationally, to find an international audience, and to also progress in their filmmaking career?
Yeah, Go Short is definitely a stepping stone for Dutch directors. We have an extensive professionals program, of course, with workshops, panels, stuff like that, where directors can learn more about the practice of filmmaking. But Go Short is always also a place to meet. Who just started filmmaking can meet very experienced European directors from all over Europe. But the festival is also a place to meet other industry professionals. For example, Go Short invites many international film programmers as well. So the filmmakers can get to know them and their festivals and what kind of films they like. But these programmers are also there to scout films for their festivals. So we always highlight the newest Dutch films for them.
Mm.
And we also have some special screenings where we show films that are just finished and, for example, don't have a world premiere yet. And it happens that a programmer of Locarno, for example, sees a film there and programs it at their festival. So yeah, we try everything in our power to help Dutch films. And well, next to that, we're also, of course, a film festival. So we also connect short films to audiences. And as we consider ourselves as, well, the festival for short film, we also showcase a very broad spectrum of what short film can be. So also for filmmakers that make very audience-friendly films and filmmakers that make very experimental films, we all try to combine them into programs and connect them to our local and national audiences.
Fantastic. I get the impression from having this conversation with you that you basically see short film format as essentially one big cinematic playground where a filmmaker can try around and mess around with the tools of cinema to address the key themes that they want to address in their work. Is that something that you try to also accentuate and foster with the festival, with Go Short, that you try to emphasize this aspect of freedom that you constantly come back to, that this is the place and the moment and the format in which you should be completely liberated?
Yeah, the short format, also because of the lower budgets, which I think I mentioned before, gives much opportunity for experiment, and we definitely encourage filmmakers to do so. We generally favor films that explore a bit with the form or look for the boundaries of existing genres. Films that are in between documentary and fiction, for example, we tend to love. And this year at Go Short, we even have a special program line dedicated to the diversity and form of the audiovisual format. There we showcase many types of shorts in the cinema, from the newest trends that are connected to new technologies, to weird archives, to very research-based essays. We also look beyond the cinema space and explore, for example, VR. And this year we also have, for the first time, video games. So in our opinion, video games are a very interesting form of audiovisual storytelling, where you involve the viewer or the player directly into how the story develops. So yeah, this year there's a free, accessible, and playable exhibition of some of the best indie games of the past year. Yeah, that's a bit of how broad our scope is.
Well, this segues very nicely, maybe, Mathieu, in some of the films that you sent me of this year's selection of Go Short that we could briefly maybe touch upon because they are very fascinating. You sent me 3 short films to watch for this episode, and I'm just very curious why and also why they stand out, and maybe it's nice to briefly discuss them. And the first one is a film that premiered at Berlinale called Their Eyes by Nicolas Goraud, which I thought was an incredibly strong film about these international workers that are basically processing all of this visual data that is being used for self-driving cars to navigate themselves in traffic and in their environments. And it basically shows this invisible labor that is actually very concretely taking place and being done by human beings who are frankly incredibly underpaid, so that we can all think that artificial intelligence technology and all of these like self-driving marvels of the future, that they are actually built on the backs of human labor instead of some magical technological thinking that just came out of nowhere. What struck you about this film to include it in Go Short?
Maybe first, as a bit of a context, it's selected for a European competition, and this is the third time we selected a film from Nicolas Gouraud. He made it twice to our international student competition before, and once even won the award for Best Student Film. So we're very happy to see him back in our European competition. And next to that, he's also playing in a program with a talk afterwards about the future of self-driving cars and AI. Yeah, but about the film, I think you sold it very well. Nicolas is a very research-based filmmaker, delving very deep into his topics. And yeah, you can also see it very well here. And I think the nicest or most interesting part of the film is that it connects so many topics to this self-driving car. On the surface level, it is about the future of the self-driving car and the role that artificial intelligence also plays in it. It's about the bias that this AI might have, how this AI gets its information from human labor, but also about the globalization of work and broader inequalities in the world.
Yeah.
And in the end, the film also gets very personal. Some personal stories, you zoom into the lives of these people. And there you see that where they live, it has little or nothing to do with the spaces they are actually trying to map. So when I look at their streets, I would think that a self-driving car would never survive there. So yeah, I think it's a very layered and complex film that has so many interesting things to say.
Yeah, it's so funny how this data visualization gets, and somebody in the film also explains it over the voiceover, that they see it almost as a painting because it gets this painterly quality where every different category of what they see in the traffic and they have to mark gets a different color. So you have this very layered, textured image that they are constantly producing, which also raises this interesting question how you can extract actually art in some strange way or artistry in this manual labor that's very mechanic and very repetitious, but there's some strange, almost sinister beauty in it as well. And I thought that the film balanced that very nicely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also the access that Nicola has with this film, like the workers that want to talk about their work so freely and how they talk about it, is also very interesting. And also the things that they deal with, like there's this side story that at some point they found out that if they use a VPN and set it to United States, they earn much more, and that there is some snitch in the group that threats them out. And I don't know, there's so interesting stories about how these communities work. It's very fascinating, and I think all these topics, I think people should know how these things are made and who's making them. So it's also very important for people to see.
It only reinforces the idea that cinema in itself, but then especially also this, let's say, more experimental, free format of the short film, it allows this window literally onto the world, which also maybe segues
Mm-hmm.
nicely into The Diary of a Sky by Lawrence Abu Hamdan, a film about the Israeli occupation of Lebanese airspace and what it means to live in a country where fighter jets and airplanes and all of these other military aircrafts are constantly going and crashing through the sky, basically audioly and but sonically and visually occupying constantly the space that you need for a society to reflect, to be, to grow, to dream, to wonder, to write poetry, all of those things. Very touching film. And also, by the way, if we're talking about shorts, a film that really sits on the margin of what we could consider a short film, considering the fact it's close to 45 minutes. But it maybe really needs that time and this repetition of constantly seeing these airplanes and stuff to understand the severity of what this military apparatus does within Lebanon and its society. Can you talk a little bit more about this film and why it's so important to screen it at Go Short?
Maybe as a bit of a context, we have competition several program lines. One is called Reflections, and it's focused very much about more political society topics that we also want to have a conversation about after the film. And we have one program line called Refresh, which is much about experimenting with the form. And I think this film is very much in between because it's very topical and you can very nicely talk about it afterwards and maybe also need it. But also in the form, it's very interesting because, this Lawrence Abu Hamdan, he is as much an audio researcher as he is a visual artist. And the way he works with sound is a very nice dimension on what filmmaking can be. He's just like Nicolas Gros. He's a very research-based filmmaker. And we screened this film in a little profile of him, where we also screened one other film, which is called Rubber-Coated Steel. And this film is about how two Palestinian kids got killed by an Israeli army. And there was no real case around it. They said they used rubber bullets, but Lawrence Abu Hamdan did very precise research about the sound recording of the shooting. By analyzing this sound file, he found out that it were actually lethal bullets that were used. And his research was then later also again used in court. And I think in this film that you watched, The Diary of a Sky, it's also a very extensive research about all the recordings that people made of the sky where Israel is violating the airspace of Lebanon. Again, a topic I don't think many people know about because it's just he explains it very well in this film. It's just a way of warfare. You can say it's bullying, having this sound all the time above your country, like there's something going on and war on the verge. But it's actually harming. He also talks about his research that it raises your blood pressure if you hear these jets all the time. So it's a really serious thing that no one knows about. And if I remember the numbers well, he shows every month a report, and every month there are 200 jets, 60 drones. I don't know. It's really serious numbers. It's such a big thing that he makes visible. And I think it's very interesting.
And you mentioned something that I am at this point very interested in, which is in Diary of a Sky, that the visuals consist of a lot of these self-recorded videos by people that are, bearing witness literally with their smartphone devices and whatnot of what's happening in their immediate surroundings. And it makes me think, for instance, about Ukraine being the most recorded war in the history of humanity on audiovisual equipment, which only stresses the importance of filmmakers and artists to try to somehow, in a cinematic sense, make sense of all of this data basically that's being accrued, and how you can elevate basically a crude recording, which is just literally the bearing witness of the event, and put it somewhere in the context of art and cinema so that we, an audience, can make sense of that as well.
Yeah.
Do you see this happening a lot with the filmmakers that you program in your festival, that they in some ways transform these more, let's say, banal materials and transcend it into the echelon of cinema?
Yeah, definitely. And the example you gave is a very good example because I think 2 years ago, we also had a Ukrainian guest curator who made basically the program you described, and programming films with footage made by people living in Ukraine, contextualizing it as some sort of new archive that you build around the war, and which is sometimes also proof for war crimes. And there are many filmmakers working with that, and she made a very nice program around it. There are many filmmakers that also work with found footage from YouTube around, for example, migration, or I don't know, everything is documented and filmmakers are using it, and it's wonderful.
It really is. Like I said, it only stresses the importance of cinema in the 21st century to actually respond to all of these crises on a geopolitical and existential scale that we have to go through. Well, and also speaking about the archive, I'm quite interested in this refresh program line that you're featuring at Go Short Festival. And you send me some very peculiar old company video by the Philips NXP company, film called Behavior in the Clean Room, which is something very beautiful and archaic and strange. And I pitched the previous two short films quite well, but I find it very hard maybe to give the succinct words to this particular film that you showed me. Can you talk maybe a little bit about what this Behavior in the Clean Room is, and in what way you are presenting it, and why it is important to present these archival works as well in Go Short?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for a little bit of context, part of a screening with more films from the same archive. So it is the archive of Philips and NXP. NXP used to be part of Philips and then became its own company, but they were involved in building microchips. I think, first transistors and later the computer chips. And this archive is based in Nijmegen, and it's set up by old employees of the company. And they have so many different stuff there, like from old company newspapers to unedited memoirs of Fritz Philips, first the mobile phones, but also like really marvelous technical drawings of chips. Like, yeah, I walked around there one day, and there are many like old employees walking around there that have so many stories about everything you see. But they also have a very nice video archive, mostly VHS tapes. And it's also from, like, I don't know, Santa Claus celebration of the team to an old CEO speech.
Fantastic.
There are many gems there in this archive, and also, for example, this behavior in a clean room. And this video, how to describe it? It's meant as to be shown to the employees, because when you make microchips, like every little air wave and dust that can fall in the wrong place can be deadly for this microchip. And as soon as they found out that all of this was so important, they made this, in my opinion, quite comical and intriguing video about what to do and what not to do in this so-called clean room. So the room that has to stay clean. And yeah, you see people reading newspapers under some sort of like smoke screen. And when they flip a page, you see that the air flows, and this is wrong, and that they cannot smoke there. And I don't know, you see many people walking in weird suits through some smoke in a fully black environment. And it's weird, but also somehow it can have the statics of a modern art film.
It reminds me a lot of this kind of like internet vaporwave kind of digital art coded aesthetic,
Mm-hmm.
where you take a lot of these like classic 80s and 90s visual sources and make them very much reflect on our current internet era, in which everything can be like digitally enhanced and weirder and kind of like mashed up and all these things.
The ending is also quite comical, because you have this very long sequence about what to do and what to do, and then they in 1 minute explain the importance of all of this. And they say like, this is very important that you will not fuck up the microchips, because on the one hand it can be very inconvenient when your mobile phone doesn't work properly, but it can also kill babies.
Yes, exactly.
You see a baby in a hospital. I don't know, it is a very comical, moralistic ending. So yeah, and why is this important for us to screen? I think that making archives visible that otherwise would never be visible. I think it's also the job of a film festival to do that where possible. And yeah, like I said, I think there's some real art in there. Sometimes accidental, sometimes maybe not accidental. I heard from some very like weird close-ups of materials they use. That there's a film around that, and I don't know, it can be visually very interesting, and gives also a nice time frame of things, because this history of the microchip, it's like NXP plays an important role in it. So like all these videos are part of the history of the microchip in the Netherlands, but also in the world. So it's also an important story to tell.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it comes back to the first film, basically, Their Eyes, and this idea of, how we envision the future is going to look like. And then you can take these archival films that are basically promises of what can happen technologically speaking in the future. And they immediately speak to the technology that we are now thinking about, that we're in doubts about how to implement them in a global society and all of those things. So then I see all of these through lines basically in the festival programming, where all of these films, even though they're in different sections, are communicating with each other, telling a somewhat shared narrative. How intentional is that for you to bring these connections together on a festival that obviously also operates on a very vast scale and programs so many different films?
Mm-hmm. Well, we obviously look very well at the diversity of our program, and that everything we screen is not the same as another program we screen. When we select the short films that we select, we look at mostly two things. How does it tell its story? And is there something new, refreshing, interesting going on? Or what story does it tell? And I think the latter is maybe the most important. So when a film gives a real insight in the development of a new technology, it's often something that you haven't seen often in films yet. I haven't seen many feature films about the self-driving car, but we have a full short film program around it, because in short film it's already a topic, and I see many films around it. So yeah, in that sense, it's intentional to find topics that haven't been discussed much, and that usually people who go to cinema to feature films probably haven't encountered yet. So in that sense, it's very intentional, and yeah, the fact that they like communicate with each other, I think it's maybe sometimes accidental, sometimes it's intentional. I think when it comes to technology, it's often something that is very well connected with film because filmmakers tend to use different and new technologies and also in making their films.
Absolutely.
When it comes to this refresh program line, that is much about experimenting with the form. It's very often experimenting with new, often digital possibilities. So we have a program around desktop essays, and we also see so many machinima films now.
Yes, and for the listeners' context, desktop video essays are films that are basically shot and recorded entirely within the environment of somebody's mostly laptop, just screen recording and then using that footage to edit it. And machinima films are films that are being made in video game engines where you use the game itself to stage the film that you want to make, yeah?
Exactly, and I now see movie advertising a lot with this.
Grand Theft Hamlet, yes, that's taking place
Exactly, yeah.
entirely in the GTA world, yeah.
This is fairly new in feature films. There are not that many feature machinimas. I know a few, but in short film, it already has quite a long history, like from early 2000s or maybe and 90s. And it's, yeah, you see in short film that filmmakers try to use everything they can that can be interesting in telling a story. So yeah, it's very often tied to new technologies. And when it comes to the self-driving car, which is much about AI, which is obviously also a very big topic in filmmaking itself. So in that sense, it's very closely tied to filmmaking and short film.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the self-driving car is basically a device with a million cameras attached to it as well, and then you can wonder what does it record and what does it see, which brings us back to the first film we discussed. Mathieu, maybe as a final question, because also we are doing a ticket giveaway with Celebrating Cinema to our listeners, who can win a couple of tickets to come to see films at Go Short. How can you basically describe the festival in a couple of sentences, in just in terms of its vibe, its energy, what people can expect when they come and travel to Nijmegen to watch some of the films at your festival? What would you share with the listeners to create some expectations?
I think we have a very welcoming atmosphere where film professionals and audiences are mingled on the festival terrain. Our home base is a very big cinema, Lux, but we also have a festival terrain like on the square next to it with a big tent and some food trucks. We have a glass house with a big video game exhibition because, in my opinion, this is also part of like audiovisual
The
storytelling.
intersection of technologies and mediums.
Exactly, and VR, which is free accessible, and the video game exhibition is also playable video games from the last year. I think there is something for everyone to find in the program. If you're very nerdy and want to dig in some weird archives, or in film history, or if you want to watch very specific topical films and want to talk about them later, or if you just want to have a nice evening out and go to a late night horror program or watch Oscar shorts or something else. I think there's something for everyone to find.
Fantastic. So I think it's a big recommendation to travel down to Nijmegen and to experience it for yourself. Mathieu, thank you so much for sharing some program insights and for telling something more about the marvelous, fantastic, strange, experimental, fun dimensions of short films. We're very excited about the upcoming festival, and most of all, we wish you a lot of good luck with its 17th edition and all the preparations still to come.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope to see you at Go Short after this elevating pitch of our festival.
I hope you liked our conversation with Mathieu Jansen, the artistic director of Go Short Film Festival, and I hope that you're excited now about diving into the marvelous world of short film cinema. We at Celebrating Cinema are here to help you with that because we're giving away 2 tickets for you and a friend to experience some of the films at Go Short yourself. In order to win them, send an email to celebratingcinema@lab111.nl, and in the email, tell us about your favorite short film, and we will pick a winner based on these submissions. So do it now, celebratingcinema@lab111.nl. And for now, we wish you a beautiful day.
Stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab by following at Lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. Do you love what we do? Support us by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us climb the ranks of the podcast charts. And don't forget to check the show notes for all the films mentioned, bonus info, and ticket links. This was a Lab 111 production, edited and produced by Elliot Bloom, with music from Hugo Emmerzael and artwork from Studio FFF.